your service on the battlefield and beyond. Thanks, bro.
All right, what's going on, everybody? I'm Liam Cogan. This is the 3 Bravo podcast, and today we're going to be diving deep into some of the House subcommittee meetings on the VA crisis line and the TAPS program. So I recently went through and watched both the VA crisis line and the TAPS program House committee meetings, trying to figure out why things don't change at the rate at which we all think they should. So watched the meeting, talked a little bit about it on the news, and now I want to give like my full take here. So let's start with the VA crisis line. So we all know that there were big spending cuts at the VA, and so everyone wants to know, how are these going to precipitate? A lot of people ask all the time, are these going to affect our benefits? Secretary Doug Collins, VA Secretary Doug Collins, continues to say no. However, people can say no and then things change, right? It's, people call that flip-flopping or whatever. It truly is just conditions change. Now, we've seen a lot of people fired from the VA and or walking away because they didn't want to come back to work, which is, semi-understandable. One thing that has happened is, so the VA crisis line employees had a come back to work protocol, or whatever you want to call it, and they hated it, obviously. So they either quit or they couldn't perform as well. A lot of people said when you have these crisis line calls, it's pretty sensitive. So to say, like, let's do this in an office setting is it's like not what they wanted. Let's just kind of put it like that. They didn't want to take these sensitive phone calls in an office setting, which I can totally understand. So right, wrong, or indifferent, you had a lot of people walking away. You had some people getting cut from their positions. And so you kind of have this vacuum of employees working at this place where legacy knowledge is really important. So in this vacuum of employees, now you have like these Gen Z, I'm even going to skip millennials, but maybe some millennials, but you have a lot more Gen Z coming into these call centers in newer capacities, right? And so a lot of the things that they were saying at the subcommittee hearing aside from the grandstanding, I don't know if anyone else out there has ever watched a subcommittee hearing or a committee hearing in Congress while they're actually doing their jobs and they're on Capitol Hill. But the grandstanding is so fucking obnoxious. So when you start every meeting, or every time you speak, or everything you say has to do with something with the current administration and why it's so bad, and you just want people to catch like a little clip of that, and people will clip that out, and then they'll turn the whole meeting into something that was, politically driven. This is the VA. We are apolitical. We are just trying to do right by veterans. Please stop grandstanding in these committees. It is so embarrassing. Veterans do not give a shit about what you think about the greater situation. We want to know that veteran care is going to get better. Let me speak on behalf of all veterans. We care about veterans. That's what we want to improve. So aside from all of that, and this is from both meetings, I don't want to like talk about this too much. So the VA crisis line meeting, they wanted to go over a lot of things, but in the genesis, and this is like a meeting with a whistleblower and, I guess you would say 2 whistleblowers, but they're talking about the change in management tactics at the VA crisis line. So the management tactics have become more about like economy of motion, whereas like think Amazon, like how Amazon runs things. It's less about like user comfortability and more about like, let's get things done in the most economic way possible, and we'll make it the best for the consumer. That's how they kind of wanted to approach this new thing, which is like a noble effort in some capacities. But if you're tracking on your like own individual idea of metrics, you're losing legacy knowledge because these folks who have been there a long time didn't want to come back to work. You're going to, in short, you're going to lose a lot. Okay, so if you're measuring the wrong KPIs and you're measuring the wrong, and you're promoting like the wrong kind of business, you're gonna end up losing. So that's what this entire committee meeting was really about. And the whistleblowers are trying to call to the attention of the American public is that the call center tech is low. I think we can all assume that that's going to be true with any kind of bureaucratic system in the government. They're tracking the wrong KPIs or just metric tracking to have successful discourse. There's a generational gap in withstanding verbal abuse. So on these call lines, you get a lot of people who are slinging a lot of verbal abuse. They're going through trauma. They have, potentially TBIs, PTSD. There's a lot to digest there. It's just going to happen. So if you're going to work at one of these call centers, thicken up that skin. It's not about you. It's not about what you do. It is just the system. Now, a huge issue is they're not able to control the volume, right? Because you have a revolving door going around these new, I don't know, Gen Zs or millennials who can't withstand the verbal abuse. And so you're not training them properly for the job. And apparently they're, legacy or longtime employees are having to open multiple chats. So you can do this via text, you can do this via email, you can do this via phone. But employees are having to open multiple chats at once to have multiple conversations to really get the job done appropriately. That's just going to minimize the efficacy of what we're trying to do here, which is eliminate veteran suicide, right? Like that's the whole point of the crisis line is like call somebody and let's take a step back. And so you're also looking at combating trauma. Like, so there's another thing that I noticed in this meeting, and they didn't address this, and people don't address this often enough, is that we often perpetuate to accelerate our own means. So what I'm saying here is that someone coming from the crisis line is going to use the word combat trauma often because they want to elevate the necessity for care in the eyes of lawmakers. We need to start coming to the table and being super open and honest about how many people are having these traumatic experiences, because when you just look at it, core numbers from World War II, Vietnam to now, there is no shot that everyone who's coming to this call center has seen legitimate combat, has done the real deal job, and they are coming there for the care. Now, that's not to minimize anybody's career or their work or their worth or whatever. But you do have people just saying they've seen combat and other things, operator syndrome, you have imposter syndrome, you have all these things. If we center everything around combat care, this turns into a different thing. This is the combat suicide hotline. So the infatuation with saying everything is combat related, I hope we can step away from that verbiage so we can treat everyone with proper care and introduce ourselves into every situation the same. If someone is acting more violent and we want to kind of build like protocols for that, sure. But like the infatuation with it is, I could see it. The reason I bring it up is I could see it. I could hear it in these senators and congressmen and women. I could see it in their eyes and in the way they were talking. Like when they hear the word combat, they're like, oh, wow, that's what it is. Right. And that's not it. Okay. So we have to steer away from that verbiage. It's giving the wrong message. So I'm going to get away from the veteran crisis line there. Just understand that like you can be for budget cuts, you can be against budget cuts, but what we all need to be for is proper veteran care. And unfortunately, budget cuts coming from the veteran crisis hotline aren't great. Okay. So and since this has been reversed, Doug Collins has reinstated a lot of people that were cut or the numbers or whatever, right? From that exact benefit. So just all in, yeah, like we need to do better by vets by avoiding cutting critical care. Now, when this shit gets political, people want to say all this shit about what I mean or all this shit about what someone means when they say, yes, avoid cutting critical care. No, I don't mean what you mean. I mean the veteran crisis hotline. That's it. There's no assuming after that. I told you what I mean. So moving on to the House committee meeting about the TAPS program. So if you are a veteran, you know what this program is, and you just probably know how shitty it is. The TAPS program is basically the transition assistance program. It's a requirement for getting out. So this is how all these Congress people and senators were talking about this in this committee. I believe maybe it's just Congress. I'm not super sure. But the Congress people in this committee were talking about how it is a requirement. Last time I checked in the military, when there is a requirement, 52% don't meet the standard. Okay, when there's a requirement for facial hair or your haircut or physical fitness standards and or making it to a bus to go on deployment on time, it's 52% is like mission critical failure. Okay, we don't have numbers that low in the military. So to say that 52% meet TAPS requirements, it wasn't a requirement. It's not a requirement. It's a suggestion. 52, half and half is a suggestion. It is not a requirement. You are not making it required if you have a 50% miss rate. Okay. So, and then 60% of veterans are underemployed after 6 years. Okay. So you're looking at a failure, a complete failure in the TAPS program if you're hitting 50% of people, because I can tell you that 90% of those 50% don't remember a single thing you said over the year-long iterations of online courses, NKOs, and garbage. And then you see the proofs in the pudding when 60% of veterans are underemployed after 6 years of being out of the military. So that is the issue at hand, and that's what they, opened up and began to address. So there was one thing that Mr. Hakan, oh God, I'm going to butcher his name. Actually, I have it written down, don't I? Let's see here. Mr. Maybe I didn't. That's too bad. Hakansa, whatever. He is the chair on the committee for Veterans Affairs and or the TAPS program. And I think it was just Veterans Affairs, but his whole spiel was after he got he did some grandstanding like they all have to do apparently. It's like a pseudo requirement. After he did some grandstanding, he got to his point that the VA system should be an opt-out system instead of opt-in. And what that means is basically when you're getting out of the military, you have to opt into VA service, where it should be an opt-out thing. If you don't want it, you should just have to say so, which I agree with in general. The whole idea that the VA is opt-in is kind of like setting the standard for failure. Also at this meeting, the DoD wasn't present as they were asked to be, which, everyone had like their political views on how they approach these situations and what they can be and can't be present for. I think just shooting the middle of the aisle, like everyone should understand that DoD's mission is not this. This is not the DoD's mission, right? Just as much as we don't like people sticking their nose in things where they don't belong, this is something that is part of them. It's legacy to them. It's their people, but they're not really their people anymore. When you get out of the military, you're not really the military's people anymore. You're not combat effective. You're not in the ranks. You're not in the rank and file, and you're not doing things. So the DoD wasn't present, which, like their presence probably could help. However, their presence is not necessary to execute this mission. It is not their mission. Their mission is putting bad people in the ground. So, and preparing for that. So that's it. Like definitively, they don't have to do stuff with the Veterans Affairs. Veterans Affairs get paid more than any other, branch of arm of the government or whatever. So the VA gets a ton of money to fix these issues. Let's keep that ball rolling and just focus on the VA. In this committee, they had witnesses who were, like quote unquote experts of the military community, and some of them were. I really appreciated some of the things they said. A lot of the commentary they brought, but I draw issue with saying like industry experts are people promoting unfinished technology. So like shit that's literally not done and has zero evidence of being effective. You could be testing it and it could be working great in tests. But I mean, the same could be said for a lot of things, like failed video games. Like, did people like them when they came out and they didn't work right? No, they gave up on them. So the idea in the entire federal government for just like promoting things that don't work yet, aren't active, paying a ton of money for contracts for things that never get delivered. It's an institutional failure on all levels to say like, oh yeah, let's bring this guy on as an expert. He's making something that could be good. You totally disagree with that. Nothing against the guy, nothing against the product. Just the idea that we could say this is an industry leading expert is stupid. And then there's a guy on this board who wasn't even a veteran. I mean, you're speaking on veterans issues and how they affect veterans, and you're not a veteran. You can be as good as you want. You can be as great as you want at your job. And also, you have 2 SaaS companies working up there. So if you're not privy, it's basically companies that are working on the back end for technology for the government. Like, you're just not spun up. You might know metrics and you might know whatever, but it is not the veteran that you know. It's a personal opinion, but whatever. And so they also addressed this a bunch of times. So many people got these things wrong, like saying that SkillBridge is a part of the TAPS program and we have to fix TAPS so we can fix SkillBridge. That's just wrong. Like if you're on this committee, like don't be so wrong all the time. It's embarrassing. And they're all talking about SkillBridge and they didn't address the fact that they're talking about how effective and important SkillBridge is. No one addressed the fact that SkillBridge has been essentially slashed. Opportunities have been slashed across the board, to include a slash in basically enrollment in June of 2024 for the Marines, basically just taking it from 180 days down to 120 days for juniors and 90 days for mid to senior Marines. The Navy took a slash in mid to senior level sailors from 180 to 120. The Army slashed, and that was in 2023. The Army slashed this year in April from 180 days to 120 for junior soldiers and down to 90 for mid to senior level soldiers. So it wasn't even addressed. Almost everyone spoke about SkillBridge, even the experts, and nobody even addressed that the Army slashed this benefit this year. Just super disappointing to see how spun up people were on their own garbage and just not in general. Very, very sad to see that get missed. For how many people said the word SkillBridge and how zero of them brought up that we were slashing this program and the eligibility for so many service members and the difficulty that people face even when the benefits aren't slashed to get into it. Nobody talked about it. They just talked about how great it was and what can we do to get more people in it. They didn't even know. That's what happens when you have a board with those kinds of people. That's my opinion. So some of them were great on the board, talking about like legitimate issues, changing the victim narrative, and then the fact that TAPS is in one ear out the other because it's awful. It's a horrible program. And that, no one brought this up because there were so many people on the board talking about SaaS and technology. Technology does not solve emotional issues. Having general awareness of what benefits are allocated to you does. But I don't know any homeless people on the streets, struggling veterans who are really in the gutter, who are just browsing for new applications on their phone. I understand the idea of getting it in the hands of vets through the TAPS program, but we just said the TAPS program is broken. So if you're telling me you want to fix the software on the back end of a broken program, it'd be like putting a jetpack on a bicycle. Moving on from that, so those are kind of the net failures from that committee and the idea that they think TAPS is working, and so we can just strap on all these new pieces of equipment to it and fix it. You're not addressing the root issue. I can talk about that on my own, what my nonprofit does. I'm not going to self-aggrandize on that one. If you want to look into it, go to 3bravo.org, check out our events page, check out our About Us and our mission. And then the last thing I want to address is a lot of people are wondering, how is the big, beautiful bill going to affect me? In short, probably not. It's probably not going to affect you at all. The way it will affect you is that it is affecting SNAP payments and Medicaid. So if you are on Medicaid or SNAP as a veteran, it will affect you. The fact that both of these committees talked about this, the fact that veterans are going to lose critical care through Medicaid and SNAP, it's just like cherry picking shit that's really silly and doesn't have a space in the serious issues that veterans face. I'm not saying I'm taking a hard stance on Medicaid or SNAP. I don't give a shit. I don't think you should contribute nothing to a society and get something out of it. However, some people can only contribute nothing. So what is the solution there? I don't know. I'm not running for office. I'm not telling you. But something that will affect you is the work opportunity tax credit. Sorry, the work opportunity tax credit. So WOTC. So they opened this up to include vets laid off after Jan 2025 from federal positions. But the work opportunity tax credit. So what is in this bill is a general expansion of power for a lot of these programs that do help benefits, but the expansion of power is relatively ambiguous. That's all you need to understand. So it's like heavily bureaucratic. It sounds good for them, and then it doesn't sound bad for them, which usually just means the net negative. Or excuse me, a net neutral. A lot of this stuff is just net neutral. They're just going to add fluff garbage in there that's a net neutral. It says it's expanding powers for the work opportunity tax credit, which encourages employers to hire veterans. It's just very vague on how it will actually do that. And then there's a potential for increased access to SBA loans, business credits, and surplus equipment. So that surplus equipment is through the Small Business Enhancement Act. If you're not tracking on that, it helps veterans who get certified access surplus equipment that the military is getting rid of. So if you want to go get some sweet equipment for a very low price, surplus military equipment, visit https //certifications.sba.gov/ and you just need to get certified for the Veteran Small Business Enhancement Act. Just follow the prompts. From what I understand, it's relatively difficult to get certified, but if you have a business that generally needs trucks or forklifts, things like that, you'll find some crazy good deals. So look into that if that is you. This is my breakdown of the very current Veterans Affairs news. This is the hot off the presses take off all the shit that affects you as a veteran. I'm Liam Cogan. This is 3 Bravo. And before I go, I want to tell you that August 22nd, we will be hosting a race in Northern Nevada. It is 220 miles over 20 mountains with 22-pound rucks on our backs. I'll be running with a lot of the boys. You have veterans from the Special Operations community, veterans from the Marines, veterans from the Army, veterans from the regular Navy, and then you have some special endurance athletes who are going to make this first year of this event as impactful as possible. It is 22 veterans a day who commit suicide, no matter what any kind of industry wants to tell you, because they are always missing these numbers. So 22 vets a day, 220 miles, August 22nd, 22-pound rucks. We're doing this to raise awareness and to raise funds to change some big issues in the VA. Stay tuned. Check it out. I'm Liam Cogan. This is 3 Bravo. I'll check y'all later.